Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Today is Monday, July 22nd, 2019. I am MD. Shortly, we will continue with the reading of the Mueller report. We're currently reading Volume 2 of the report. Stay with me and we will update you on the state of affairs in regards to this report in just 60 seconds. Live from New York City, at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Once again, welcome. If you've been here before, thank you. Your participation makes the journey a little bit lighter and tad more bearable. If you join us for the first time, once again, welcome to the Fourth Branch program. The Fourth Branch program is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to perfect the union. In order to do so, we ought to remove the biggest obstacle of all: ignorance. JFK said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Thus, the importance of eradicating ignorance from our society. Welcome. On May 17, 2017, Special Counsel Robert Mueller was appointed in order to look into the interference in the 2016 presidential election by a foreign country, the United States' #1 enemy, Russia. That was his mandate, nothing else. And as it was At that time, politicians of both major political parties, Democrats and Republican, approved of the choice. Because no matter who you are in Washington, Robert Mueller is known to be a straight shooter, a guy who doesn't get himself involved in politics, but rather would get to the heart of the matter and provide you exactly the information and deliver exactly based on his mandate. Robert Mueller got to work. But unfortunately, we have in the Oval Office a president whose primary job, according to not only to the Constitution, but the oath of office he took to protect, to defend and protect the United States of America from all enemies, foreign and domestic. As such, an affront into our election system ought to be met with the ultimate power, the power of the presidency. At any other time, the President of the United States would have dedicated all the resources necessary to help the investigators find all the details about everything that happened. Except that this is not the case. The President of the United States, feeling that he too was involved was in bed with Russia, want at all costs to prevent the investigation, to slow down the investigation, to derail the investigation. You don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be an investigator, you don't have to be an attorney, you don't need a master's degree to know that the only reason any individual would try to impede an investigation is if that individual is guilty of something. But unfortunately, we are living in an era where criminals are welcome in the Republican Party. And it is not just the constituent who welcome them, but the legislators as well are okay with the idea of a criminal leading our government. Ironic, isn't it? We wage war across the world to remove dictators, to remove corrupt individuals from leading any country in the name of democracy, in the name of providing to the people of that country a person with integrity. Right here in the United States of America, we have probably the most corrupt individual leading the nation. But that's not all. Donald Trump is not just corrupt. We already established that Donald Trump was in bed with the United States' #1 enemy, Russia. As you probably should know by now, whether you were involved in politics or you simply watch TV, especially if you are interested in shows that are characteristic of criminal investigation, spy, and so on, you would know that the only reason individuals are involved in cover-up is if there is a crime. Now, you don't have to be a genius to know that people do not get involved in cover-up if there is no crime. Why would they? As such, it is no mistake that Donald Trump has spent a whole 2 years during the investigation enlisting everyone, legislators, private citizens, to help him smear, slow down, derail the investigation. Not because Donald Trump is innocent. In fact, you would be foolish to think that an innocent individual would go to that length in order to stop, to derail, to prevent an investigation. So I don't have to convince you that Donald Trump knows what he did. In fact, in one occasion during the time that when the investigation just started, Donald Trump himself said, "It would be wrong." I'm quoting Donald Trump for you, supporters of Donald Trump. "It would be wrong for our team to solicit help from Russia. It would be wrong." Now, we already know that Donald Trump lies more frequently than the devil himself. So if you took that as a denial he had nothing to do with Russia, then you would be as foolish as he is. Because the only reason he said all that is, of course, to dispel the clouds hanging over his head. The investigation lasted 2+ years. Well, actually not quite, just about 2 years. And for a full year, Robert Mueller tried every avenue possible to get Donald Trump to sit down with him and talk. For someone who is so innocent, he should try not to prove that. And yet, those who support him seem to think that's the case. We have a serious problem in this country. But the bigger problem is not so much the constituents who are gullible and naive, but rather the legislators who know that Donald Trump is guilty, who have the information. They've seen the information. In fact, Devin Nunes at some point was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He saw that information. In fact, he used that to help the president out of a jam. In other words, the Republican Party, legislators and constituents alike, are happy to hang out with a criminal. They're okay with that. Not me saying that. They know Donald Trump is a criminal. The only reason the President of the United States is not indicted is because of a DOJ rule which prohibits indicting a sitting president. You heard correctly. Donald Trump would have been indicted. Yes, Donald Trump is a criminal. And yet, constituents and legislators alike are happy to tag along. What has the United States become? He is the country that pretends to have values, going around the world, waging war and tell others, we need to put in office a man of integrity to lead the people. How hypocritical of us. We need to put in office men with integrity. And yet, right here at home, we have probably the slimiest crook sitting in the Oval Office, and we said, whoopee! We're fine with that. Well, actually, not the whole country, the Republican Party. And it is ironic even. This is the party that claimed to have evangelical, those people who are Christian, who serve God, who believe truth matters, people with high level of morality, people with integrity, people with ethics,
people who speak a language that says you are a Christian. Yes, those very people who always want to preach someone about integrity are the very people today who are steadfast behind Donald Trump. We even have the leaders speaking out and supporting Donald Trump. Yes, the slimest crook in the country today. We have evangelicals. And if you go to the Republican website, they tell you they have family values. What are those? Of course, they have a list of that. Remember the time when the country used to believe that Republicans are patriots? Today, sleeping with the enemy, embracing Russia, they have all kind of rationale to defend the president's behavior vis-a-vis the United States of America. Now, they don't have to convince the constituents. The constituents are already convinced. They're trying to convince the rest of the country what they're doing is for the good of the country. We've seen them in action. We know they don't mean anything good for the country. The United States of America is indeed in crisis. Wednesday, July 24th, 2019, Robert Mueller will be in Capitol Hill to answer questions. Question about the report that he issued. Yes, it hopefully will be nice that those asking questions are truly interested in understanding the report. Because as of date, we know one thing, that the President of the United States committed obstruction of justice, which is a crime. But the report is not clear-cut for most people. But what makes the situation even worse is the fact that we have an Attorney General whose job is to make sure everyone abides by the rule of law, but instead decides to become the President of the United States Attorney. Yes, the Attorney General doesn't work for the President. Yes, the President appoints the Attorney General, but the Attorney General works for the people of the United States, not the President. But that Attorney General, Bill Barr, works for the President of the United States. Everyone that Donald Trump appoints, he wants those people to work for him, not for the country. And that alone should have been enough for anyone who voted and supported Donald Trump to say enough is enough. But we also know that none of those people is patriot. Yes, they all like the label. They put their hand on their chest during national anthem, and that makes them patriot. That's not patriotism. We have today in the Oval Office an individual who has destroyed the fabric of our society, who has trampled the rule of law, who has shredded the Constitution, which most Republicans love to refer to, especially when it comes to right to bear arms. And yet, they don't have any problem letting that individual destroy, shred the Constitution. How is that for a party that claims to have family values, that claims to be patriot? When we return, we will continue with the reading of the Mueller report.
The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. We conducted that investigation, and we kept the Office of the Acting Attorney General apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the President clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
If we had confidence the president did not commit a crime, we would have said so. The president's reaction to public confirmation of the FBI Russia investigation. Once again, for those of you who joined me for the first time, let me say that on July 24th, 2019, that this coming Wednesday, Robert Mueller will be on Capitol Hill to talk about the Mueller report, at least to provide some clarification on issues that still seems to be confusing, especially with Bill Barr trying to spread wrong information, to spread lies about the report. So hopefully that will be the ultimate words on the report. Also, we will put an end to the reading of the Mueller report because, as we mentioned before, if Mueller on Capitol Hill cannot dispel, cannot remove the clouds, cannot explain with a certain degree of clarity what this is all about, then we're afraid there is no amount of reading that can change your mind about the individual sitting in the Oval Office. So we're hoping that questions will be answered and people will pay attention to the fact that we have in the Oval Office today an individual who is not only not fit to be president, but a criminal. Overview. In early March 2017, the president learned that Sessions was considering recusing from the Russia investigation and tried to prevent the recusal. After Sessions announced his recusal on March 2nd, the president expressed anger at Sessions for the decision and then privately asked Sessions to unrecuse. On March 20th, 2017, Comey publicly disclosed the existence of the FBI Russia investigation. In the days that followed, the president contacted Comey and other intelligence agency leaders and asked them to push back publicly on the suggestion that the president had any connection to the Russian election interference in order to, quote, lift the cloud, and, quote, of the ongoing investigation. Evidence. Attorney General Sessions recuses from the Russia investigation. In late February 2017, the Department of Justice began an internal analysis of whether Sessions should recuse from the Russia investigation based on his role in the 2016 Trump campaign. On March 1st, 2017, the press reported that in his January confirmation hearing to become Attorney General, Sessions had not disclosed two meetings he had with Russian Ambassador Kislyak before the presidential election, leading to congressional calls for Sessions to recuse or for a special counsel to investigate Russia's interference in the presidential election. Also, on March 1st, the president called Comey and said he wanted to check in and see how Comey was doing. How funny, isn't it? According to an email Comey sent to his chief of staff after the call, the president, quote, talked about Sessions a bit, end of quote, and said that he had heard Comey was doing great and said that he hoped Comey would come by to say hello when he was at the White House. Comey interpreted the call as an effort by the president to, quote, pull him in, end of quote, but it did not perceive the call as an attempt by the president to find out what Comey was doing with the Flynn investigation. The next morning, the president called McGahn and urged him to contact Sessions to tell him not to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. McGahn understood the president to be concerned that a recusal would make Sessions look guilty for omitting detail in his confirmation hearing, leave the president unprotected from an investigation that could hobble the presidency and derail his policy objective, and detract from favorable press coverage of a presidential address to Congress the president had delivered earlier in the week. McGahn reached out to Sessions and reported that the president was not happy about the possibility of recusal. Sessions replied that he intended to follow the rules on recusal. McGahn reported back to the president about the call with Sessions, and the president reiterated that he did not want Sessions to recuse. Throughout the day, McGahn continued trying on behalf of the president to avert Sessions' recusal by speaking to Sessions' personal counsel, Sessions' chief of staff, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and by contacting Sessions himself 2 more times. Sessions recalled that other White House advisors also called him that day to argue against his recusal. That afternoon, Sessions announced his decision to recuse, quote, from any existing or future investigation of any matters related in any way to the campaign for President of the United States, end of quote. Sessions believed the decision to recuse was not a close call given the applicable language in the Code of Federal Regulation, which Sessions considered to be clear and decisive. Sessions thought that any argument that the Code of Federal Regulation CFR did not apply to him was, quote, very thin. Sessions got the impression, based on calls he received from the White House official, that the president was very upset with him and did not think he had done his duty as Attorney General. Shortly after Sessions announced his recusal, the White House counsel office directed that Sessions should not be contacted about the matter. Internal White House counsel's office notes from March 2, 2017 state, quote, no contact with Sessions and no communication, serious concern about obstruction, end of quote. On March 3rd, the day after Sessions' recusal, McGahn was called into the Oval Office. Other advisors were there, including Priebus and Bannon. The president opened the conversation by saying, quote, I don't have a lawyer. The president expressed anger at McGahn about the recusal and brought up Roy Cohn, stating that he wished Cohn was his attorney. McGahn interpreted this comment as directed at him, suggesting that Cohn would fight for the president, whereas McGahn would not. The president wanted McGahn to talk to Sessions about the recusal, but McGahn told the president that DOJ ethics official had weighed in on Sessions' decision to recuse. The president then brought up former Attorney General Robert Kennedy and Eric Holder and said that they had protected the president. The president also pushed back on the DOJ contact policy and said words to the effect of, quote, "You telling me that Bobby and Jack didn't talk about investigation? Or Obama didn't tell Eric Holder who to investigate?" Bannon recalled that the president was as mad as Bannon had ever seen him, and that he screamed at McGahn about how weak Sessions was. Bannon recalled telling the president that Sessions' recusal was not a surprise, and that before the inauguration they had discussed that Sessions would have to recuse from campaign-related investigation because of his work on the Trump campaign. That weekend, Sessions and McGahn flew to Mar-a-Lago to meet with the president. Sessions recalled that the president pulled him aside to speak to him alone and suggested that Sessions should unrecuse from the Russia investigation. The president contrasted Sessions with Attorney General Holder and Kennedy, who had developed a strategy to help their president where Sessions had not. Sessions said he had the impression that the president feared that the investigation could spin out of control and disrupt his ability to govern, which Sessions could have helped avert if he were still overseeing it. On March 5, 2017, the White House Counsel Office was informed that the FBI was asking for transition period record relating to Flynn, indicating that the FBI was still actively investigating him. On March 6, the president told advisor that he wanted to call the acting attorney general to find out whether the White House or the president was being investigated, although it is not clear whether the president knew at that time of the FBI recent request concerning Flynn. FBI Director Comey publicly confirms the existence of the Russia investigation in testimony before HPSCI. On March 9, 2017, Comey briefed the Gang of 8 congressional leaders about the FBI investigation of Russia interference, including an identification of the principal U.S. subject of the investigation. Although it is unclear whether the president knew of that briefing at the time, notes taken by Annie Donaldson, then McGahn Chief of Staff, on March 12, 2017 state, quote, "POTUS in panic, chaos, need binders to put in front of POTUS, all things related to Russia," end of quote. The week after Comey's briefing, the White House Counsel Office was in contact with SSCI Chairman Senator Richard Burr about the Russia investigation and appears to have received information about the status of the FBI investigation. On March 20th, 2017, Comey was scheduled to testify before HPSCI. In advance of Comey's testimony, congressional officials made clear that they wanted Comey to provide information about the ongoing FBI investigation. Dana Boente, who at that time was the acting Attorney General for the Russia investigation, authorized Comey to confirm the existence of the Russia investigation and agreed that Comey should decline to comment on whether any particular individual, including the president, were being investigated. In his opening remark at the HPSCI hearing, which were drafted in consultation with the Department of Justice, Comey stated that he had, quote, been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of its counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government effort to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, and that include investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts. As with any counterintelligence investigation, this will also include an assessment of whether any crimes were committed. Comey added that he would not comment further on what the FBI was, quote, doing and whose conduct it was examining, end of quote, because the investigation was ongoing and classified. But he observed that he had, quote, taken the extraordinary step in consultation with the Department of Justice of briefing these Congress leaders in a classified setting in detail about the investigation, end of quote. Comey was specifically asked whether the President Trump was, quote, under investigation during the campaign, end of quote, or under investigation now. Comey declined to answer, stating, please don't interpret what I've said as the chair and ranking know, we have briefed him in great detail on the subject of the investigation and what we're doing, but I'm not going to answer about anybody in this forum, end of quote. Comey was also asked whether the FBI was investigating the information contained in the Steele reporting, and he declined to answer. According to McGahn and Donaldson, the president had expressed frustration with Comey before his March 20 testimony, and the testimony made matters worse. The president had previously criticized Comey for too frequently making headlines and for not attending intelligence briefing at the White House, and the president suspected Comey of leaking certain information to the media. McGahn said the president thought Comey was acting like, quote, his own branch of government, end of quote. Press reports following Comey's March 20th testimony suggested that the FBI was investigating the president, contrary to what Comey had told the president at the end of January 6, 2017 intelligence assessment briefing. McGahn, Donaldson, and senior advisor Stephen Mueller recalled that the president was upset with Comey's testimony and the press coverage that followed because of the suggestion that the president was under investigation. Notes from the White House counsel's office dated March 21, 2017 indicate that the president was, quote, besides himself, end of quote, over Comey's testimony. The president called McGahn repeatedly that day to ask him to intervene with the Department of Justice, and according to the notes, the president was, quote, getting hotter and hotter. Can't read, end of quote. Officials in the White House counsel became so concerned that the president would fire Comey that they began drafting a memorandum that examined whether the president needed cause to terminate the FBI director. At the president's urging, McGahn contacted Bonte several times on March 21, 2017 to seek Bonte's assistance in having Comey or the Department of Justice correct the misperception that the president was under investigation. Bonte did not specifically recall the conversation, although he did remember one conversation with McGahn around this time where McGahn asked if there was a way to speed up or end the Russia investigation as quickly as possible. Bonte said McGahn told him the president was under a cloud and it made it hard for him to govern. Bonte recalled telling McGahn that there was no good way to shorten the investigation, and attempting to do so could erode confidence in the investigation conclusion. Bonte said McGahn agreed and dropped the issue. The president also sought to speak with Bonte directly, but McGahn told the president that Bonte did not want to talk to the president about the request. to intervene with Comey. McGahn recalled Bonte telling him in court that day that he did not think it was sustainable for Comey to stay on as FBI director for the next 4 years, which McGahn said he conveyed to the president. Bonte did not recall discussing with McGahn or anyone else the idea that Comey should not continue as FBI director.
The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. And we conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting attorney general apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
If we had confidence that the president did not commit a crime, we would have said so. The president of the United States is a criminal. And it's not about Russia either. Of course, the Russia added more weight to it. The co-conspirator, Michael Cohen, who worked with the president on other matters, is currently sitting in jail. And as mentioned earlier, the only reason Donald Trump is not indicted is because he sits in the Oval Office. And the DOJ rule is you cannot indict a sitting president. Which begs the question, what kind of rule is that? Now, when the rule was crafted, you could have said it was a good rule because it is believed that the President of the United States has too much on his plate to worry about being indicted. But also, when the rule was being drafted, it seems that no one thought of a president clearly violating the law. When we say no one is above the law, what does that mean if we cannot indict the President of the United States? It is kind of an interesting dilemma, don't you think? We cannot say no one is above the law, but at the same time, we have law that says you cannot indict a sitting president. Did those who craft the rules think it through? Because that makes no sense. No one is above the law is translated in simple terms that no matter who commits a crime must answer for the crime. That's what that means. I don't know where common sense fits in this. I don't know how someone who studied law, who's been practicing it, who works at high level at the Department of Justice, obviously because It's not just anyone who came up or crafted such law, such rule. And it's not just one person who crafted it and then it becomes the rule of the DOJ. It went through a series of discussion with high-level officials, with people at the DOJ, seasoned attorney, people who've been practicing, laws for a very long time. How could they have missed that simple aspect of the problem? No one is above the law does not address the problem of no sitting president can be indicted. In fact, the very aspect of that rule that says no sitting president can be indicted translates to the president is above the law. Now, for the longest, we never saw that flaw. And the reason is because individuals who vied and became president of the United States, they had some integrity. Not that they didn't do anything wrong, because in politics, a lot of those people, you remember Ronald Reagan, the Iran-Contra affair. I mean, there are a lot of bad things that have happened under previous president. But almost actually not almost, everything bad that those previous presidents have done, they bad because they did not follow the rules of our Constitution. They were wrong. But if you want to follow those actions, they were all done for one reason. Now, wrong, however wrong it was, but each one of those presidents did something that they believe was necessary to advance the affairs of the country. I'm not condoning the wrongdoing. I'm just saying you take any of the wrongdoing by the previous president and you would say mostly their action, as wrong as they were, had what you would call a noble goal. Donald Trump, on the other hand, whatever he did was for his personal interest, not for the United States. Collaborating with Russia was not for the United States. No one can argue that Donald Trump did go in bed with Russia because it would benefit the United States. So those individuals who drafted those rules did not appropriately address that simple sentence in our Constitution: no one is above the law. And today we are confronted with having in the Oval Office an individual who committed a crime but cannot be indicted because the DOJ rule puts him above the law. The question is, why? Why would the DOJ put Donald Trump, or any president for that matter, above the law? That is a question we ought to ask the individual who crafted those rules. They're still alive. I've seen them all the time on TV. I hope that this presentation was useful to you. If not, you already know what to do. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion. Let us know how to do it better. As I've always said, this program is not going anywhere. You might as well help make it better. In the meantime, should you have a specific topic you would like us to talk about, send it to us. We will research it, we will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Hopefully you can join me again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Good day. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time.
The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.